We have excellent moderator, my good friend Senator Ernie Grossman.
Thank you very much. So one of the mainstays of the 8 years of the Coastal Caucus Economic Summit has been having our federal delegation come by and help out. And the most consistent of those people, you saw one of the more consistent yesterday at noon. The other, most consistent, is Senator Ron Wyden. From the very beginning, he has put aside time to make sure he can come and be a part of this, and we appreciate that a lot. So thank you, Ron, for being that person. So we have a few questions for the Senator, and I'll get right started. Senator Wyden, as the ranking Democrat on the Finance Committee, and as a senior member of the Committees of Energy and Natural Resources, Budget and Intelligence, what are your priorities moving forward in this next year?
Arnie, if I were to give you my top priority, it would be to take some of the Coastal Caucus sentiment for collaboration and bipartisanship to the nation's capital. And I want to thank you for what you're doing. And I'm going to make this a filibuster-free zone today, so we're not going to get a long set of filibusters, but the centerpiece of my agenda in the fall, apropos of your spirit, is basically that same kind of collaboration. For example, a few weeks ago, defying the odds, Senator Grassley and I got out of the Finance Committee a bipartisan prescription drug bill to finally stop this price gouging in pharmacies all across Oregon and across the country. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Second, apropos of good news, because I know you all are talking about forestry, in 40 days, just over a month, the Forest Service will fully implement the bill that Republican Senator Mike Crapo and I worked on for 6 years to end fire borrowing. So we will get back into fire prevention. And I don't have to tell you that Oregon has 2 million acres, 2 million, that are shovel-ready for collaborative efforts to go in there and clean out the debris and the like. That is a bipartisan bill. The third area is increasing affordable housing supply. Our legislature obviously tried to break some new ground there. I have proposed approaches that look to the low-income housing tax credit, a different approach for middle-income housing, but I have to tell you that folks are getting flattened from one corner of Oregon to another with respect to housing prices, and I think the federal government can be a better and smarter partner in that area as well. And finally, the fourth area deals with broadband and communications for small ports. We don't yet have any Republican sponsors on this, but we're going to by the beginning of this fall, and in particular, I'm concerned that the lack of really significant broadband services at small ports is really holding up our commercial fisheries, our seafood processors, our businesses, tourism. That would be a fourth priority for the fall, and I'm going to try to inject a little bit of the Coastal Caucus vibe with respect to collaboration and bipartisanship. I think it's a wonderful message you're sending. I'll try to take it to Washington.
So, from sports fishing to river rafting to hiking, the coast has countless recreation opportunities. What are you doing to help our coastal businesses build on this recreational economy that has really blossomed?
So the latest numbers on the recreation economy are about $11 billion annually. So this is a huge economic, multiplier. And whether it's guides or kayakers, the craft breweries, the list just goes on and on. And recently I introduced with two of the Congress's most conservative Republicans a bill that we call the R&R bill. Recreation, not red tape. And what the point of these bills are, and they're in both the House and the Senate, is, for example, to end some of the bureaucratic water torture that people go through when they try to get permits and things of that nature, to have a uniform permitting system at the Forest Service and BLM. And I think there is a lot of interest, particularly in the Energy and Natural Resources Committee that I chaired before I became the senior member of the Finance Committee, in a major recreation bill. And I think we all know, for Oregon, this is an economic bonanza, literally from one corner of the state to another.
Thank you. Yesterday we had a panel with winemakers, and we kept saying, wait, we need you. We don't do any wine growing on the coast. But they said, yes, but everybody wants to see and recreate at the coast. We want them to pick up a bottle of wine on their way. So we agree with you. Recreation on the coast has become a really big issue. Over one-third of Oregonians live in rural communities where access to health care can be particularly challenging. But what are you doing to improve access to high-quality health care in rural areas? And thanks again on prescription drugs.
3 areas, actually 1.5, that are really lost. The first, and something I've dreamed about, I'm looking around the room because I see people that I've worked with since my days with the Great Panthers. Medicare today is not Medicare that we had when I was coming up. Medicare when I was coming up had 2 parts. There was Part A for hospitals, there was Part B for doctors. That was it. Today, Medicare is very different. It's cancer, diabetes, heart disease, stroke. Pretty soon, the biggest healthcare program in America is going to be about people who have 2 or more of these conditions. Might have diabetes and heart issues, 2 or more of the conditions I described. Warren Hatch, before he retired, said he wanted to do a big Medicare bill. I said, I've got one for you. It is now being implemented, and for folks in rural areas, this will mean more home care for seniors at home, more use of non-physician providers, and particularly an expanded telehealth kind of service, which I know is very important for your rural hospitals. Second, of course, we know we've got a major problem with respect to opioids and illicit drugs. I just came from the Florence pharmacy, where I stopped to talk about some of the issues for the smaller pharmacies. And one area that I asked about is a provision I got through that a lot of you asked me for, was to allow the provider to directly prescribe to the pharmacy, so you wouldn't have so many prescriptions moving around in the community and on the streets and illicit drugs, and that's being implemented. Finally, in rural Oregon, as you know, we have a major mental health crisis. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. The suicide rate and the like. And the Federal Communications Commission just this last week said that they were going to start moving on my idea for a 3-number phone system, so that anybody who contacted them, that number, would know that there is only one thing on the table, and that is making sure that the person on the other end of the line has an opportunity to access all the services, so we don't have our veterans and others committing suicide. Oregon is proud to lead in a lot of areas. We aren't so proud to be up at the top in terms of the suicide rate, and that third approach would help us turn it around.
So one of the other things that makes some people anxious, especially some of our older people on the coast, has to do with this ongoing lawsuit against the Affordable Care Act. And what are, in your thoughts, about how do we protect it, how do we know, and how will it affect rural areas? What are you doing to help us protect the AC and the people who already have existing conditions and so on?
The key for rural areas is particularly protecting Medicaid now. The Affordable Care Act, as you know, is in a big lawsuit in federal court, and frankly, I'm very troubled about where it is. It's going through a, how should I describe it? It's going through a conservative circuit. It looks like it's going to go up to the federal, go up to the Supreme Court, and John Roberts, who helped us the last time, may not take the same view because the law, of course, has changed. So Medicaid is an absolute lifeline for rural Oregon. And as a senior Democrat on the Finance Committee, I've made it my special priority to protect Medicaid. As you know, we were able to do that by a one-vote margin when the ACA came up the last time, and that was because the late John McCain came in and with that famous thumbs down voted with us. But I will tell you, I'm being very vigilant with respect to Medicaid, because every single time Donald Trump goes to play golf with Lindsey Graham, I watch the news that night to figure out if Lindsey Graham talked Trump into letting him gut Medicaid again, because as you'll recall, the Graham-Cassidy bill would have taken the safety net away from all of the rural communities. And that program pays 2/3 of the nursing home bill in this country. And I want you to know, as long as I am the ranking Democrat on the Senate Finance Committee, anybody who tries to take away Medicaid from rural Oregon is going to have a fight they will remember for the rest of their life on their hands.
So, a little change. This fire season has been, knock on wood, better than the last two seasons, but our good fortune could change at any minute. We had some rain yesterday, which we were thankful for. What are you doing to help us prevent forest fires? And give a little more about the bills that you've passed that are going to help us pay.
I went to the milepost 97 fire. Unfortunately, that has been really the only big one that we've had. But as much as anything, we have to make sure that finally the government is moving to a more efficient way of funding the key services. And people ask me about my views about fire. They say, Ron, what are you going to do about fire? And I'm going to say, prevention, prevention, prevention. For years, and I started this when I was chairman of the committee, people all over the country, at one point, a bunch of senators from back east signed on to the bill I had with Senator Crapo to end fire borrowing. And I walked up to him and I said, my God, I didn't know there were a lot of trees in wherever it was, Cleveland or Brooklyn or wherever it was. And what they told me was that fire borrowing had so screwed up the system of funding the Forest Service that basically, because all the money went west when there was a big fire, and instead of treating it like a disaster, they raided the prevention fund, people in Ohio and Cleveland and everywhere else couldn't get the money they needed for the services that were important to them. So we're finally now moving to an ethic of fire prevention. It starts in 40 days, folks. I mean, all of you know is local elected officials doesn't really count until not only after you pass the bill, you've got all the rules, underway. And we've got 2 million acres of shovel-ready material that either snags or hazardous materials, and now we're going to get a chance to go in and clean them out. There's going to be some other streamlining efforts. I would just make one point on this. Let's make sure the streamlining at the Forest Service and the resource agencies and the Trump administration is streamlining and not going over the line to gutting the environmental laws. Because we all saw with the spotted owl that the only thing you get out of that is a lawyer's full employment program. What I want natural resources policies that create jobs for rural communities and protect our treasures. Not a bunch of fees that go to providing college for lawyers.
So, one of the big issues that we had, and our speaker was really one of the big people behind it, had to do with housing insecurity in our state in this last session. It isn't just a problem in Portland. Here in the coast of rural Oregon, and she knows that, it's part of what we've dealt with. The lack of affordable housing, homelessness is a serious problem. What are you doing at the federal level to address this housing problem?
Big priority when we get back. I think we're going to have a tax bill. I've introduced legislation that would add more than 450,000 affordable housing units to the national housing supply. Look, you know as well as I do, housing policy in America needs a major remodel. And we began it at the Oregon legislature, and there will be a tax bill between now and the end of the year. And I'm going to do everything I can to get as much of that bipartisan bill that I've offered up as it relates to low-income and middle-income housing into that package. I would encourage all of you, because you belong to various groups, county officials, state officials, and others, between now and September, get in touch with your officials. Say you heard from the ranking Democrat on the Senate Finance Committee, we want housing in any tax bill at the end of the year.
Thank you. You can't come and talk on coastal economy without talking about commercial fisheries. What are you doing to help promote the export of Oregon's bounty?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I want to make sure you can actually export the bounty, because Trump's tariffs are certainly going to start crimping our seafood exports. We haven't seen it, but I will tell you, 1 out of 5 jobs in Oregon depends on international trade. The trade jobs pay better than do the non-trade jobs because there's a higher value-added component. I believe Donald Trump's absolutely incoherent trade policy, where they zig and zag from one approach to another, is really taking a toll on our export. The fact is, in Oregon, our export markets are less open now than on the day Donald Trump took over. And I met with the president early on in his administration. I said, Mr. President, I'll tell you, we Democrats are with you in terms of fighting China cheating. There's no question China has ripped us off. China has ripped us off, forced us to locate their whole host of barriers. But this go-it-alone strategy on trade, it's got to end. Oregon is strongest. And Arnie asked me what I'm doing to make sure we can export our bounty. I want to make sure we take the penalties off the exports. And the first thing we can do is say, no more going it alone on trade. We're going to get with our allies so that we can do 2 things. 1, we can get them to buy our products. And 2, we can get them to work with us and fight China and get rid of those barriers and do it the right way, because we have collective muscle rather than the wrong way, which is putting tariffs on Oregonians.
So, one of the things that I have been probably more impressed with than anything since I was high school principal all the way through the stuff, and your terms in the legislature, is the fact that you made a commitment when you first got elected that you would visit every county and have a county. I have watched you meet that commitment year after year. I don't know how you keep the stamina to do it, but I know you're on that mission right now as you go around. So where are you now on all those commitments that you made?
Well, yesterday in Newport I had town hall meeting number 947. And I think what I would say more than anything else is, first, a big thank you to all of you, because I'm looking around the room and I can start over there and go right to that corner. So many of you have not only come, but you have been the moderators, you have been the folks who prepared our staff. As much as anything today, I wanted to come and say thank you for this relationship. And I'm just going to close this. I think we have one bit of business that we have to do, and that is that all of the important issues that are central to Oregon, and I'm talking about healthcare, I'm talking about transportation, I'm talking about trade, I'm talking about housing, all of them require the kind of collaboration that is what the Coastal Caucus is all about. There's not one of them. Look at the Medicaid issue that I mentioned. That is a federal state, program. The state is playing an enormous role, and we're lucky to have Kate Brown and our legislative leadership that has made this a priority. But the reason I'm here is not to run around and boast about how many town meetings I had, but to say thanks to all of you for the collaboration, the cooperation. I hope you've noticed that most of the issues that I've touched on, that I'm spending my time on, involve bipartisan cooperation. And that is true for areas we haven't even talked about. You may have seen that, and I'm not sure it's a headline that you see every single day, but you might have seen the headline, Mitch McConnell and Ron Wyden cooperate on hemp. Get this. Anybody know how many farmers are signed up to participate in the hemp program? More than 1,500. We are going to be kind of the leaders. Kentucky and Oregon have a favorable climate, by the way, for hemp. But I mean, the point is, ag very much fits the kind of economic engine of our state, which is to grow stuff here, make stuff here, innovate here, and then ship it all over the world. So your collaboration in the Coastal Caucus, and what Arnie and Betsy and all of you have built, is going to be a story I try to take back to Washington, D.C. And I continue to believe that, Thomas Jefferson was the originator of this theory because he said, I know luck has a lot to do with doing well. And he goes, that's why I work harder than anybody else to benefit from the luck. And the point is, that's been the ethic of the Coastal Caucus, is to work hard, work with people, do it in a collaborative way. Thanks for having me, and thanks for this relationship that is not just about town meeting, but all the things that we need to do to practice what I started calling a few years ago, the Oregon way. Thanks, everybody.